Hi, welcome to the Bee Harmony presentation on honeybee caste, life cycle, and duties. Bee Harmony is a nonprofit organization dedicated to the preservation of honeybees. If you like our program or have questions, please go to beeharmony.org and fill in the questionnaire. Also, if you'd like, send us a donation. My name's Ed Irwin, a master beekeeper, and I'll guide you through this program. Enjoy the time and the information. So what is a honeybee caste? The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines caste as a specialized form, such as worker of an ant or bee, of a polymorphic social insect that carries out a particular function in the colony. It defines polymorphic as existence of a species in several forms of independent of the variations of sex, which, as you will see, is very true regarding the honeybee. The honeybee life cycle has four distinct phases. First, eggs are very small and hard to see for beginner beekeepers. They look like tiny grains of white rice, and usually there is only one per wax cell. Larva. The larval stage of bees is a time of eating and growth. In fact, it is often referred to as the eating phase. Bee larvae resemble white grubs. From a beginning that is almost too small to see, they grow as fat, straight, soon filling the bottom of the cell. Pupa. Despite the cocoon spinning and development, bee maintains a larval skin for a bit. It still looks like a bee larva. This is called pre-pupal stage as the bee begins to transform into an adult. Hive workers seal the pupa in the cell using wax caps made from scraps of beeswax. During the remainder of the time as a pupa, our bees begin to look more like an adult bee. The outer skin is shed, and eyes, wings, and legs develop. When the final pupa skin is shed, our fully winged adult bee is ready to chew her way out of the cell. The total development time varies a bit among the three castes of bees, but the basic miraculous process is the same. 24 days for drones, 21 days for worker bees, and 16 days for queens. The adult, after maturing for a couple of days, the adult bee is ready to take on her role in the colony. For the worker bee, her first few weeks, 3 weeks on average, are spent on duties inside. Then she becomes a foraging worker outside the hive. The egg. The honeybee metamorphosis begins when the queen lays an egg. The worker bees build the cells for the queen. In most of the cells, she lays a fertilized egg that will develop into a worker bee. In cells that are slightly larger than the worker cells, she lays unfertilized eggs that will grow into drones. The egg stage of development lasts only 3 days. Queens lay a single egg in the cell built by the worker bees. The cell must be spotless or the queen moves on to another cell. The queen positions the egg in an upright position, standing on its end, at the bottom of the cell. Larva. After 3 days, the egg hatches into a white, worm-like grub called a larva, curled up in the bottom of the wax cell. The worker bees feed the larva royal jelly for the first few days and then switch to a mixture of honey, carbohydrate, and pollen, protein. This mixture of honey and pollen is referred to as bee bread. If the hive needs a new queen, the larva will be fed a diet of only royal jelly. Each larva is fed approximately 1,300 meals a day by the worker bees. Within a 5-day period, the larva grows 1,500 times larger than its original size. At this point, worker bees cap the cell with 10 colored portions of wax and propolis, and the larva spins a cocoon around her body. The larval stage lasts for about 6 days for worker bees, 5 days for queens, and just over 6 days for drones. The larva is now officially a pupa. Pupa. In the pupa stage, the larva begins to transform into an adult bee, developing eyes, wings, and legs. The pupa stage lasts 12.5 days for a worker bee, 8 days for a queen, and 14.5 days for a drone. At the last stage of development, the bee grows hair that covers its body. Once fully developed, the bee chews its way out of the cell. At this point, the bee is born fully grown as an adult bee and knows exactly what their job is. Queen. The queen bee can live 3 to 4 years, but her biological clock develops quickly. Just a week after emerging from her queen cell, the new queen flies from the hive to mate. If she doesn't do so within 20 days, it's too late. She loses her ability to mate. If successful, however, she never needs to mate again. She stores millions of sperm in her spermatica and uses it to fertilize eggs throughout her life. Just 24 hours after mating, the queen begins her lifelong task of laying eggs and is capable of producing up to 2,000 eggs in a single day. She is able to produce the equivalent of her own body weight in a single day. In order to accomplish this feat, worker bees take care of all her needs, including feeding and grooming her. The queen is the only fertile female in the colony and is the only bee capable of laying fertilized eggs. She continuously emits pheromone called bee perfume that only the bees in the hive can smell. This pheromone assures the bees in the hive of the hive's identity. Drone. Drones, the male bees, have very large and thick body. As a matriarchal society, they're used for a single purpose of mating with the virgin queen so she may fertilize eggs. He flies around at an altitude of 40 to 200 feet in search of virgin queen bees in their maiden flights. His odds of finding one are slim, but if he is fortunate to meet and mate in flight, the virgin queen retains his endophallus, storing it inside her body for future use, and he falls to the ground and dies. They cannot sting to help defend the hive, nor does he have any necessary body structures to collect pollen or nectar to contribute and feed the hive. They cannot even feed themselves. A drone is hatched from an unfertilized eggs. This process is called ornithococcus parthenogenesis. This is done as only 1% of the single set of genes. That means he is only one set of chromosomes from the mother. So, a drone has no father, but a grandfather from his mother's side. Cells. Queen cells, because the queen is larger and longer than workers, their growth chamber must be bigger. She cannot develop in a normal small cell. These specially designed queen cells resemble peanuts on the frame of the cone. Drone cells often cause confusion. Don't be fooled by another type of structure in the beehive. Drone brood is sometimes confused for queen cells by new beekeepers. They are, however, distinctly different than larger peanut-shaped queen cells that hang down from the face of the comb. Drone brood is reared in chambers that are slightly larger than those of workers, and because drones are a bit bigger, their cap cells protrude from the surface of the cone. Worker bee. Worker bees constitute the largest population in the colony, and they are all females. They are unable to produce fertilized eggs. However, if there is no queen, they sometimes lay unfertilized eggs, which become male drones. Each worker bee, guided by a biological clock, assumes different responsibilities and performs specific duties as she reaches a certain age. Worker bees are responsible for making honey and beeswax. All worker bees are capable of producing royal jelly, a milky concentration secreted from the food glands in their heads. Royal jelly is an important component of the worker bee's diet during the larva stage. The lifespan of an adult worker bee varies with the time of year. When colonies are active in spring and summer, worker bees may only live as long as 5 to 6 weeks. During the inactive period in winter, a worker bee lives 5 months or more. Days 1 and 2, cleaners. After birth, the new bee cleans its own birth cell. Days 1 and 2, the first worker bees spend their time cleaning and polishing empty brood cells, making the cells ready to receive new eggs and store nectar and pollen. The queen inspects the cells, and if they are not clean, the cleaners will have to repeat the cleaning. Days 3 to 5 and 6 to 11, nurses. Days 3 to 5, worker bees become brood care bees and assume the role of incubating and caring for developing larvae. Days 6 to 11, they feed the youngest larvae. The future worker bees and drones are fed a mixture of pollen, honey, and royal jelly. To produce a queen bee, the larvae are fed pure royal jelly. Wet brood. Young larvae floating in abundant royal jelly indicates that this colony is enjoying a rich protein intake and thus is well nourished. Practical tip. Well-fed nurse bees will keep the young larvae swimming in jelly. Lack of wet brood is a sign that the colony is short on protein and might benefit from being given pollen supplement. Day 12 through 17, builders, undertakers, and temperature controllers. Worker bees are mature enough to begin secreting and producing beeswax, the material for the construction of honeycomb. The wax flakes they produce help with the building of new wax comb and the capping of ripened honey and cells containing developing pupa. The bee must consume large amounts of food, honey, and nectar to produce these wax flakes. It takes 8 pounds of honey to produce 1 pound of wax. In 1999, Thomas Hales produced a 19-page mathematical proof that all of the possible structures such as rectangles, squares, or triangles, honeycomb use the least amount of wax and are the most efficient and practical structures in nature. As Charles Darwin put it, the honeycomb is a masterpiece of engineering and is absolutely wax. Days 12 through 17, builders, temperature controllers, and undertakers. Worker bees also take nectar and pollen from foraging bees and deposit them into cells as food for the colony. At some point, as a means of transforming nectar, which is 70% water, into honey, which is 17% water, the honey must be dried to 17 to 18 moisture, then sealed. Worker bees fan their wings at top speed. The air circulates, the moisture evaporates. If there's not enough worker bees on hand to take in the nectar from the foraging bees, they will perform a special dance called a tremble dance to encourage other workers bees to help out with the job. Nectar is passed between 200 honeybees, which add an enzyme to it. The enzyme helps ripen the honey. Pollen must be taken from the foraging bees and packed tightly to prevent it from going rancid. Day 12 through 17, builders, temperature controllers, and undertakers. The inside of a beehive is considered a pretty clean environment. The bees produce honey there and we eat it. But why are the bees in their hive so clean? It's in their genes. When worker bees are a little older, they are charged with removing dead bees and disposal of the corpses. Diseased or dead brood are also quickly removed by the undertakers before becoming a health threat to the colony. Propolis, a sticky brownish resin collected by bees, is used to seal cracks and drafts, repair their hives, and possibly even polish brood cells between brood cycles. Bees also use propolis to contain potential pathogens brought in by mice and other hive intruders. These intruders will be killed by the bees and their carcasses mummified in propolis to prevent their decay from degrading the hive environment. Day 18 through 21, Guards. Guarding the hive is the last task of a worker bee before venturing out to the fields. Guards inspect every bee that returns to the hive for familiar scent. Only members of the hive are allowed to enter. Bees from other hives are occasionally allowed in when they bribe the guard bees with nectar. These foreigners steal some honey and pollen and leave. The guard bee also looks out for any crack through which a robber bee or intruder might enter the hive. These worker bees also defend their colony against other insects. When the hive is attacked by other insects, bees can sting their foes multiple times, injecting venom and then removing the stinger safely after each stab. When the female honeybee stings a person or an animal with flesh, it cannot pull the barbed stinger back out. When their stingers are used to attack the intruders, they tear their abdomen and die as a result. They also emit alarm pheromone from a gland near their stinger to alert other bees of impending danger. Day 20 through the end of the bee's life are known as foragers. When they are about 22 days old, the worker bees leave the hive box at sunrise as foragers and visit flowers within a 2 to 3 mile radius from the hive in search of nectar, water, pollen, and propolis. If food resources are not readily available within that distance, they will fly 5 to 10 miles from the hive. They can make about 10 trips a day, each one lasting about an hour, and return to their hive at sunset. At the age of 6 to 8 weeks, most worker bees will die in the field. The further the bees have to fly, the more physical stress on their already short lifespans. During the winter, bees stop flying, hibernate in their hives, and live on stored honey from fall to the next spring. On behalf of Bee Harmony, we hope you have enjoyed this program on Honeybee Cast. Watch for more YouTube presentations from Bee Harmony. Don't forget to contact us at beeharmony.org if you have any questions or wish to contribute to help us help honeybees. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the future.